Hello, ladies and gents, boys and girls, people of all ages, sexualities, and identities, and welcome back to another film/play review. Now, for anyone wondering why I call this one a play, it's because it was originally a play. I just done some research into it halfway through watching this film because I was very confused at one point when watching this film why it said intermission. Now, this is of course because in the original storytelling of this was originally a play. But that's besides the point. Let's get into the story of this. We're introduced to a cockney girl named Liza. And Liza wants to be seen and heard as it was. However, throughout the course of the beginning of this story, she's just mocked and vindicated and treated pretty much like scum. Now, Eliza is absolutely fed up of this. She's also fed up of her father coming around and nicking a good old crown off of her. So she goes to the villa that was basically being poking at her in the market and begins to essentially ask him, beg him for help. Now the vindictive guy, who's pretty much up his arse, comes up to her and goes, sure, I can teach you the alphabet, I can teach you your A's and your Q's. And essentially he turns her from a cockney down girl to a very posh woman. And he makes a bet with his name Pickering, mate Pickering, to essentially say that he will be able to get her talking so upper class that she can even talk to the Duchess. Now, his experiment, of course, absolutely works. However, he does find himself backstepping when all of a sudden he wakes up to what's really happening here. And that's the fact that he's won the bet, he's succeeded at what he does, but he's forgotten about the main principle of his whole experiment, Liza. Yes, this story is very similar in a way to Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, except from the only thing I'll give Frankenstein is he may have been heartless towards the monster, but the monster got to get away from Frankenstein. In this, we have a character named Liza who never really escapes the power of her creator. And by the second act of the film, we find ourselves in a kind of dead zone with her. She's fed up, she's angry, she's just absolutely outraged at the way she's been treated, and she decides it's time for her to run off. So after living in the ivory tower for so long, Liza decides that she is going to go back to Covent Garden. However, she has one problem. When she arrives back in Covent Garden, no one recognises her, and she starts being treated as an outcast because she doesn't dress or act or even think the same as she once did. She then bumps into her old pa, who then pretty much starts to blame the man who's helped Liza out for the reason that he is now going to be an honest man and get married. So after leaving Covent Garden, Liza decides to go off and talk to her trainer's mother, and she has a very deep discussion and decides that it's enough, it is enough. She doesn't need the guy anymore. He's helped her out and she's going to move on with her life. He then begins to vindicate after she walks off of the idea that maybe he does need her more than he lets on. He's gotten so used to having her around, he's not quite sure what to do with himself. Liza then turns back up and forgives him, and all is kind of well in that world. Now, what did I think of My Fair Lady? Well, there was some ups and there was some downs. My biggest down with this story is the celebration of taking away someone's accent. When it comes to dialect and speak, the rich and the famous have a way of talking. It's true. However, that doesn't mean that people should forget their roots. And I feel like this is the kind of brainwashing that kind of goes along a little bit with the premise of this story. My second down with this story: the butler, the maids, and everyone in the house. Now, fair enough, they've worked for Mr. So-and-so for so long. However, they go on about her accent. In realistic terms, they shouldn't really be too bothered. Even though they have to be proper and work in the house, in most scenarios, in historical accuracy at least, most people of the time that My Fair Lady is indicating it's set would have been from lower class backgrounds. Put that into context, that is the only issue I start to have with My Fair Lady's context, is that these butlers and maids just seem to treat Miss Eliza as an outsider when really she should be an insider to them. They begin to celebrate her after she makes all her achievement, but before that they're pretty much just cunts to her. Now, on to some ups in my book. I definitely feel like Eliza becoming an independent woman is brilliant in this story. Why? Because yes, I don't agree with them taking away her accent, but I do agree with them getting rid of the whinging. Often in life, people do whinge about things, and it's not bad to have a little bit of a moan. But the only thing that this story gets right on the money is, where do you draw the line? And by the end of the story, Eliza has an argument with this bloke that's been helping her to speak the way she's going to speak. But she speaks her mind. And that's when it snaps with him that he's finally helped her achieve independence. My second up with this story is the song Get Me to the Church. It starts with a brilliant opening to her dad telling her about how he has to be an honest man now. He has to have responsibilities. He has to make a life for himself, essentially. And then it just has this beautiful montage of all these actors in this pub, all having a drink with him, having a laugh, and absolutely getting legless and having to carry him down the road to make sure he gets to the church on time. Another up as well, I would have to say, is that juxtaposition in this story. This down and beaten life where she's living down like everyone else, to going to live with the high and classy, to then trying to go back to that situation. This is another one, a bit like when I was talking recently in my Doctor Who review about change. People's lives change constantly. Whether you're rich, whether you're poor, whether you're middle class, or whether you're nothing at all. You all have changes that happen in your life. For some people, that's transitioning from sexes. For other people, that's changing your clothes. For some people out there, it may even be you just changing your blimmin' socks. But everything in your life begins to change. Everything has its kind of advancement. Sometimes some changes happen quicker than the others. And this is the one thing I feel like even this story does great. This kind of idea that she's been living in luxury, enjoying chocolates, having fancy dinners, and now suddenly she tries to go back to that old life that she once remembered, and she can't do it. So what do I give My Fair Lady out of 10, you old Chinas? I'll tell you what I'll give it. I give it about a solid 7. Why? Because as I said, I previously mentioned, I've knocked off a couple points for some very, very big reasons. The main one just being I don't like them changing her accent. I feel like we go from Cockney Audrey Hepburn to Audrey Hepburn. And then it's like, why? We could have still had her have that accent, just maybe not as loud and abrasive. I mean, for instance, I used to do a bit of public speaking at my school days, but I didn't change my accent. I just changed my approach in how I talk. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next film or play or anything review. Until then, stay beautiful, me old Chinas, and have a great night.